Speaking, I'm talking...
Sprechen Sie Deutsch?
As dir...
We should...
Parlez-vous français?
All right. I'm going to open up IMDb.
Welcome.
Back for another stunning episode of the Obscurigami podcast.
Humbly sitting before our microphones.
As always. Who are you, Ben?
I am Ben. Who are you, Thomas?
Pulled that introduction right out from under your feet. I am Thomas. This has an 8.2 on IMDb. That's pretty good.
That is good. This is a special episode of Obscurigami.
So Ben, what did we do on this episode?
Well, Thomas, we took a slightly different approach this time.
What's our usual approach?
Well, normally we just sit here and talk like buffoons, but today we decided to watch a movie and then talk like buffoons about the movie.
Right. We like to talk like buffoons.
Yes.
About obscure topics. If you couldn't surmise that from the name or previous episodes that you listened to, potentially.
If this is your first episode, welcome.
Yes. So yeah, this week we decided to take on an obscure movie. That Ben. How did you come across this? How did you choose this?
I reached into my back pocket and pulled out a favorite website of mine called
website.
A favorite website of mine called Taste of Cinema.
And
yes. I flicked through some of their lists on there, and this one was buried deep within an obscure list, and it looked kind of interesting.
Yeah.
The reviewer on there described it as Wes Anderson meets Brazil. Or Terry Gilliam.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of that vibe to it. But I don't know if we want to get into that yet.
Yeah, we'll go down that road.
That's the backstory of how I found the film.
Yeah. So we should say the name of the film.
Yes. That definitely.
This is a Kin Dza Dza.
Kin Dza Dza.
Kin Dza Dza from 1986, not the animated version.
Right.
There
is an animated remake that was made in 2013 by the same director.
We're gonna get some name butchering
as always
right up front. The director and writer is Georgi Greg Georgi
Denislev Georgi. It's probably like Smith in Russian.
Georgi is a Russian director. You can look it up on IMDb if you want the specifics, or check in the show notes. We'll include some information,
a pronunciation guide
and pronunciation guide in there.
But to be honest, the fact that we can't make heads or tails out of the writer-director's name is pretty indicative of the experience that you will have when you watch this movie.
Yes. You should watch this film. You can Google around for it. You can watch it on YouTube or find a copy somewhere.
You can find the title and spelling in the notes.
Kin Dza Dza.
Or that.
There's not really much of a plot to be spoiled in this film, but we'll be spoiling this film throughout. So if you have an interest in seeing it, which you should if you enjoy absurdist Russian cult classics, if that even sounds remotely interesting to you, imagine Monty Python meets Tarkovsky meets a little Lynch, a little Wes Anderson,
little Mad Max, a little Terry Gilliam.
Throw it into Russia. So go out there and watch it, then come back and listen to this if you want, or just listen to this.
Our commentary will be majorly enhanced by knowing what we're talking about.
Yes.
And since we can't describe it to you, the only way for you to really understand is to watch it for yourself.
Yeah.
I feel.
Yeah. I knew nothing about this movie.
Nor did I. I feel I have to...
Going in.
I read one paragraph about it before
Right.
I decided to watch it.
I knew it was Russian, and I knew it had some sci-fi element,
That's about all I knew.
which I forgot as soon as we started watching it, because it opens very much like, I don't know, something not. Right off the bat, I was like, I knew we were in for something good, because there was just that sort of like, with the shots, the way like that first. Does it start with him coming into the
It
house?
starts with
there?
a slow pan across a desolate
a
landscape.
desert, yeah.
And some very strange
Some
bohemian
strange music, yeah. For the credit sequence. And then after that, there's just this sequence where like a man who later becomes sort of the protagonist enters a house, and he just like takes off his coat and lights a cigarette and goes into a room and turns on the TV and talks to his wife. And like the way it plays out is very sort of like French New Wave, sort of like this long take that just kind of roves around the room, and then there's even like a handheld portion, and it just
From the opening scene, you kind of get
from the
that.
opening scene, I was impressed with like just it was
How
clear,
grounded
it
it
was
was.
clear we were watching a film in a filmmaking tradition that was one of care and attention, rather than just like, oh hey, set up some shots and
Yeah.
One
thing we can determine about the filmmakers that made this film, even though we don't know hardly anything about them, is that they are not lazy.
Yes. Yeah. They put quite a bit of, as I said, like care and
thought,
attention and thought into even the most absurd of elements that appear in this film.
And ladies and gentlemen, it does get absurd.
It does get quite absurd.
So things basically take off from the ordinary world of this Russian construction foreman when he is on his way to the grocery store to get some macaroni and bread, and he encounters a man claiming to be an extraterrestrial, as well as a young man carrying a violin who's trying to help this extraterrestrial. Turns out he actually is an extraterrestrial, and they accidentally get transported to another world.
And this happens quite quickly, quite abruptly. They just end up, and I love that there's this shot, they get transported, and it starts out on a close-up, and they're just talking to each other, and you can't see where they are, but they're talking about it, and there's sand, and they kind of make up their minds what to do.
Yeah. Before we've seen where they are.
Before we've seen where they are, they figure out which Russian desert would be the closest Russian desert to where they were.
Right.
And then, based on the sun, figure out which direction home would be and start walking in that. And as they start walking away, the camera just like zooms back and just reveals that they're in the middle of this like massive expanse of sand. And,
that's nothing like a Russian desert.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's your first clue that how to describe the chain of events that
follows.
There's bells.
There are bells called socks.
Yeah.
That certain classes of people wear on their noses.
There's cages that you sing in. There's beds of nails.
There's a great deal of cooing.
Lots of cooing. Lots of queuing.
Right.
Yeah, so basically very, very early on they bump into these two gentlemen, strange gentlemen, in a rather...
What's the term for it again? A plepitsat?
Yeah. If I had to describe the aesthetic of this world that they spend most of the film in, I would say it's sort of like a Mad Max of space type of aesthetic.
Yeah.
A lot of sand, a lot of very rusty mechanical style spaceships. Well, there's not that many spaceships.
It has some David Lynch kind of stuff going on too. There's a lot of like post-industrial production design.
Yeah.
And a lot of white noise kind of background noise, especially later on in the movie. But it does have a lot of Monty Python-esque humor Not in the sense that it's just raw absurdity.
Yeah.
The chain of events and the characters.
Yeah. There are like jokes throughout, things that are clearly meant to be jokes, but a lot of the humor just lies in sort of the absurdity of the situations.
Yeah, there's not a lot of the humor I think is lost on you and I.
Yeah. It's well like
Given-
one of the first jokes they make is like our two protagonists, the foreman and this younger violinist are in the desert, and
Which we should point out, they call him the violinist or the fiddler, but he doesn't actually play.
Yeah.
He's just transporting a fiddle for reasons that aren't entirely clear from the subtitles.
The translation to English is of dubious
Origin.
yeah.
If you watch the film in the same place that we watched
Yes.
the film.
Available in 2 parts on YouTube. One of the first kind of really funny moments that happens is this: our two Earthling fellows are stranded in this desert, and this kind of spaceship that looks like a rusty helmet, knight's helmet, some ancient contraption with a metal propeller on the top.
It looks like an ancient torture device.
Yeah. Or some
Or like a really demented...
like an 18th century submarine.
Yeah.
Or something like that. But it lands and it flops open, and out comes these 2 guys. One of them's in a cage, and they're just making absurd noises and yelling "coup." And our main character remarks, "Oh, a capitalist nation," or something to that effect.
Right.
And thus kicks off the comedy of the movie. So it seems like there's a lot of humor that is particular to kind of the Russian socio-political landscape at the time that is probably lost.
Yeah. And one of the main characters is a Georgian. And
Yes.
I'm sure there's a lot of jokes about that I couldn't speak to.
Yeah.
So they get involved with these 2 guys, and the whole movie basically turns into kind of one very long negotiation of our 2 protagonists basically trying to find a way to haggle their way back home, using matches and busking as their primary means of monetary gain.
Yeah. Matches seem to be of absurd value, and
They power space travel in some sort of way.
yes. And when they run out of matches to try to barter with, they turn to busking, which seems to be disproportionately a disproportionately valued commodity in this dystopian.
Well, it's kind of like movies were really popular during the Great Depression, like
Yes,
times of
yeah.
economic downturn.
Yeah. It was very clear to me, this is kind of jumping ahead a little bit. You can see how so many of the things that they're kind of commenting on throughout the film are very apparent when they play through that opening shot where he walks in to the house the second time. You see he goes in and he turns on the TV, and it's playing a song that is similar to some of the songs they've sung, and it's people. That was when I made the connection between people in a cage performing and television.
Yeah.
And so there was things like that throughout that I didn't connect right away. But
Yeah.
but
I would love to read an academic paper,
yes,
or better yet, a book.
I'm sure there's
about
some
this
great.
film.
Apparently, this is an obscure film for us as Americans to watch. Apparently, this film is basically a kind of a cult classic in Russia. So I'm sure there's some Russian literature written about it that might be good if you can find a translation.
It's pretty hard to describe.
Yeah, it's very hard to describe.
It is a singular motion picture.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything like it. I must say, I very much enjoyed this. It was a highly enjoyable 2 hours.
I would rate this film very highly.
Yeah. When I throw this into my letterbox, it's it'll be quite highly rated. It's not a movie I would hesitate to recommend to people who are into sort of an absurd time. And
anyone who's a sci-fi fan, I think, will enjoy it just on the value of the production design and the unique kind of approach that they take to space travel and concepts like that, time travel.
No, and it's a well-crafted film. It's I thought of like Tarkovsky when I was watching it, and like, well, as I mentioned before, like the French New Wave, Truffaut and
it's definitely
and stuff like
not. It's definitely not a low budget.
No, it's
quickly
not
thrown together.
It's not one of these movies that's like, oh, it's absurd, it's so good, it's so bad, it's good.
Yeah.
It's just a weird little foreign film that like somebody threw together on hacked together.
It's definitely a work of art.
Yeah.
A work of absurdist science fiction.
Yeah. I love the way the characters are treated, like, or the way the main characters behave. It seems so subversive to kind of like a fish out of water narrative, where they seem pretty adept at like picking up the they don't really struggle that much to like get a handle on the oddities of the culture. They like pick it up pretty quickly and like start to use it to their advantage and to manipulate the people around them, which is kind of like an unusual narrative that I don't feel like I've really seen before. One where like these people are thrown into a new, very strange situation and they actually adapt quite well to it. Which is,
as opposed to getting stuck in their emotions or
right. Yeah.
There's not a lot of emotional distress.
Yeah.
When they find themselves transported.
Yeah.
They just start working on a solution right away.
Yeah.
And you kind of pick up along the way what it is that they're missing, rather than a big outburst or a big scene of emotional confusion and frustration. Nobody really ever says what the heck is going on in this movie, even though there are lots of opportunities for the filmmakers to go that route. And I think that would be sort of the obvious route to take, is to have protagonists that are kind of stand-ins for the audience, that they're baffled by what they're seeing.
Yeah.
But rather than do that, they took an approach where the characters are not the sort of people to do that.
Yeah. It's so great. There's so many little moments that they just kind of like, if you're not paying attention, basically they breeze over. Like in this culture, apparently all or most of the people can read other people's minds, but you can still somehow lie to the other people. But there's this moment where they're playing chess. One of the aliens and the violinist are playing chess, and the alien apparently doesn't know how to play chess, and so he's reading the violinist's mind to imagine or to see which moves the violinist is worried he'll make next, and then making them, and he keeps beating the violinist until the violinist and they're betting, and the violinist is losing, until the violinist realizes this is happening, and so he starts thinking the wrong moves, and he wins on a big bet, and they're quite angry at him.
None of this is explained.
None of this is explained.
It's just kind of implied.
It's like a minute and a half or like 2 minute sequence where they're like
kind of tied in with another scene where somebody else is repairing the ship.
There's so many little things like that where it's just like, that's actually like a pretty interesting
scene with a lot of potential.
There's a lot of stuff going on there. It kind of hashes out a lot of how things could go down in a society where like you can read other people's minds.
Yeah. And that's something that I feel has never really been done very well.
Yeah.
Mind reading in films. It's pretty common in science fiction, but it's rarely done well, I think.
I feel like it works here because they don't really go into it. Like they don't really try to hash it out very much, which, so you can just kind of accept that it works to some extent.
Yeah, you definitely have to, at least on the first viewing, you have to kind of sit back and accept what you're watching.
The music is very interesting, very good.
The music is key.
Yeah.
I think to the comedy.
So there's like that main theme that plays over the opening credits. You're watching it, and in it there's just these like odd vocalizations that you're like, oh, that's very weird. when you're first watching and listening to it. Later on, the theme kind of repeats, and you hear those vocalizations again, but now you've sat through an hour of movie where people have been saying "coup," which is in a society or on a planet where everyone can read their minds. You don't need all but one word, so they only have one word "coup" for everything, and another word "q" for cursing, and those are their only two words, and they've been
Well, other than chattel,
right.
tsak,
Yeah,
those kind of like
that gets into the gray area where it was
descriptors,
that is that actually the language of the planet, or was that like a descriptor they were using in Russian to refer to those things? We're not really sure.
Well, I would say because they're in the subtitles, as they were untranslated from Russian, that they are not in fact Russian words.
Right. Yeah.
And they were in the lexicon at the beginning of part 2, which, by the way, according to IMDb, it was released in 2 parts.
Oh,
So there was
really?
kind
It
of
was
an
actually-
intermission in the middle of the film.
Oh, there was an intermission, or it was two, like a sequel deal?
No, it's one film, but there was kind
I
of...
see.
It was released as one film with 2 parts.
Right. That makes sense.
That's according to English language sources on IMDb.
All the comments under the YouTube video were in Russian, and I tried translating some of them. Most of them didn't make any sense, but others seemed to be talking about referencing like the social commentary and how each of the groups, there was like I forget the names of them, but the people were kind of arbitrarily divided into 3 groups. There's some kind of device that you could point at somebody, and it would shine either orange or green, and then you were one type of person or another.
Right.
And apparently each of those groups represent are parallel to a group in the Russian area. Yeah. They were referencing actual people.
The police, Etzelop, spelled backwards, is the Russian word for police. And then Patsak is Katsop in reverse, which is an offensive name for Russians in Ukraine. See, this movie is so rich.
There's a lot here.
Visually and character-wise. And I really enjoyed it, but I feel like most of what it was saying commentary-wise is probably lost on me.
Yeah, I mean, I can appreciate the grander themes.
Yeah.
The grander themes of like the arbitrary
divisions,
how
of people.
arbitrary their divisions are. I love this comment in a review. Not as dead serious as Blade Runner.
It's not really similar to Blade Runner at all. It has its own world.
I wouldn't
Blade
even
Runner does.
Yeah, I wouldn't really even compare it to Blade Runner, besides the fact that they're both sci-fis.
There's a scene where the 2 off-worlders, the 2 Earth dwellers, basically take over the whole planet by stealing a gun from a policeman. And in doing this, they manage to get all the way to the supreme leader of the planet, who basically spends a lot of time in his pool.
It has a small...
It's a very small pool.
Metal or like tin pool surrounded by sand in an enclosed room.
Yes. Which I guess, in a planet of wide open spaces, having your own confined space, and a dry planet, having a pool of water
is
that you just sit in.
Pretty much the pinnacle of society. They no longer have oceans or seas or rivers because they've converted the water to
Lutz,
which
is fuel,
some kind of fuel. Apparently, they then they can convert the Lutz back to water somehow. So it's an interesting.
Because one of the characters drinks the brake fluid.
Yeah.
One of the characters was wearing a codpiece on his head from a fighter pilot's dress.
I wondered what that was.
Since Thomas has stepped away from the mic, I'm just going to take this opportunity to say a few quick words with my co-host.
No, I'm back.
Hi, Thomas. Welcome back.
Hi, Ben.
So
I just had to get a drink of water. for my parched throat.
Imposter.
Oh, Thomas.
Yes, I'm back.
That was weird.
Hello.
You came back twice.
Yes, I'm back now.
I liked this movie.
The cinematography was great. The music
Yes.
was great.
Yes.
The set design was great.
Yes.
Um,
Most of the design.
I wouldn't
was
have
great.
much to say negatively about it. It's a pretty great experience. The plot lost me in a couple places. There was a few things that I really didn't understand. The scene at the end of part 1
Right.
where he's suddenly back in Earth.
I'm not sure if that was imaginary
Maybe it was a dream.
or an alternate future, or if it was the actual future,
Yeah. When
because they did get back to Earth,
yeah. When
and they did remember what happened, but I doubt that he
Right.
would have brought a tsak with him
there was
and a chattel.
there was some time travel towards
Yeah.
the end, and things got a little primary. So it starts
I like that you use that as an adjective.
getting it is the premier confusing time travel movies.
The Primer.
Premiere.
Primer.
Oh, premiere.
Primer.
Premiere.
Hi, can I get a Primer? Just right here.
I'm not sure how important the plot is.
It definitely didn't
to this movie.
make me feel like
It didn't really degrade things.
I don't feel like I lost anything.
Yeah.
Even though I know a lot was lost in translation.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure at what point it was a fault of the film and where it was a fault of the translation.
Yeah.
But none of that bothered me in the slightest. I was enraptured.
Very good movie. One of the commenters on YouTube was mentioning that in some parts of Russia, it's a well enough known film that people will like comment "coup" to each other, or like see a violinist busking on the streets and be like, "No one," and say like, we don't need the violinist," or something like that, which is a running joke in the movie.
Right.
So it's interesting that it's kind of like a cultural touchstone there.
Yeah.
Similar to. I
It
don't know
definitely
what
shows
it
you
might
that
be
you
a-
don't need a ton of really big set pieces to tell a
Yeah.
good story. Most
Yeah.
of the story doesn't have a lot of big set pieces,
Well, there's-
although there are some at the end.
There are still some great. Yeah, it's great in terms of a sci-fi film, although it feels more like a comedy at times than like a true sci, or not a true sci-fi, than like a serious kind of science fiction film. But it still has those elements of like, it builds out this world, even in this very absurd way, and it has those sort of glimpses of like, presumably a lot of the society lives underground, and there's a few times where they go underground into these really impressive like underground structures. There's these like balloons, glowing balloon things that
That hold people's last breaths.
look really cool. Yeah, there's just
They're
an
gravestones.
amazing amount of intriguing detail in here that I was totally not expecting.
I would say it's almost Dune or Lord of the Rings level, but I feel like to say that would be to make it seem serious and weighty.
Yeah.
And it's not serious or weighty,
No.
but it takes place in a universe that is developed to that point.
Yeah.
But it's just
It's
very
just
it's very silly.
Yeah, I really can't think of like an American equivalent of something that would be so silly but so like Monty
Seriously
Python and the
done.
Quest for the Holy Grail would be the closest thing, but that's
That's
not
not
a
it.
sci-fi. But they put a lot of, that's the only thing I can think of in terms of the same amount of effort put into something so absurd.
Mm-hmm.
I really can't think of an American film that, or even an English film
Yeah.
that.
I mean, some of Terry Gilliam's other stuff.
Yeah, would be
Time
pretty-
Bandits in Brazil, and
right.
some of that stuff is somewhat similar
Yeah,
in terms of its absurdity to production design ratio.
but this was mostly like pretty light.
Yeah.
There's one like the emotion kind of culminates when they make it to this other planet and they like go out to die, because they're very despairing about never getting back to Earth. But I think that's like kind of the darkest it ever gets.
Yeah. Watch it.
Watch it.
For sure.
Watch
it, laugh, cry, experience the full gamut of human emotion.
Download the soundtrack and put it on repeat in the car.
Listen endlessly on long road trips.
That was a surprising little jump.
That was a victory. I don't think we're going to find as many obscure movies that are that good.
Yeah.
And that well made. Although you never know. So do we want to tackle
Should we
a
hit
Wikipedia article?
a rando Wikipedia article? Yeah.
This is the part of the show where we go to ye old Wikipedia and we push the randomizer button.
Oh, there's an old Wikipedia?
And a new one. So, what we have here is Mr. Ernst Ziller. Ernst Ziller is a German architect, and he later became a Greek national in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Ernst designed some prominent buildings in Athens, it looks like. He designed a lot of municipal buildings and royal facilities.
Looks like he had the mustache of the decade.
Yeah, he definitely has a good aesthetic.
Very suave.
For a podcast.
Very suave.
He's debonair without being overly flashy.
Yeah. He's a classy guy, sort of a Tom Ford. I would say probably the Tom Ford of architecture, if I had to choose a modern equivalent based on my knowledge of Ernst Ziller just now. Looking at one picture of him. Well, he does, man.
He's done some
major
major
laundry
stuff.
list.
So yeah, if you're interested at all in the architecture of Greece, Ziller may be your guy.
A lot of
especially
mansions,
for modern.
A lot of churches, city hall, but
there's not very much information about him.
Yeah,
he was German.
We don't really know what
and he became a Greek.
What did he like to do in his spare time?
What his favorite color was.
Mostly we know what kind of buildings he there's not really references.
Yeah, it would, always a good sign.
The architect who changed the image of Greece. 500 buildings.
Man, slacker.
Can you imagine if you only designed 500 buildings in your lifetime, you would be like, phew.
Yeah.
I'm hoping whatever it is I'm known for, probably this podcast, I'm hoping there's at least 5,000 of them.
Yes. And there will be 5,000 episodes of Obscurigami, I think.
Yeah, we're well on our way.
Pretty much just coasting now.
Yeah. Well, we've done our best, so it's all downhill from here, which means we can just keep coasting.
Exactly. Well,
that's Ernst Ziller.
I don't have a lot to say about Ernst Ziller.
Yeah, look him up. Great mustache. Here's another photo.
He does have some great photos.
He had some good hair too.
He was a stylish man.
Wow, look at that. That's an interesting sort of bow tie situation.
Wow.
That's sort of like a scarf.
Kind of a cravat
situation. Thing. Yeah. Very good. I wonder if there's been I compared him to Tom Ford earlier, who is a director and a fashion designer. I wonder if there's ever been an architect / director, film director. I bet Ernst Ziller would have been one had he lived in the appropriate.
Well, the cinema was pretty big in the early 20s.
Yeah, but he would have been
quite elderly.
Pretty old. Well, but how old did he live to be though? Born in.
If George Miller can be making Mad Max.
Yeah, but George Miller's been doing it since he was. I don't think many people get into it in their 70s.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So I've concluded Ernst Miller. He would have been an architect director if he had been born 50 years later. Cool stuff. Well, Ben, where should people go if they want to see Ernst Ziller's mustache or want to see how to spell Kin Dza Dza so that they can Google it and watch it, or if they want to find other episodes of this show to listen to or something. I don't know.
You can find all this and more at Obscurigami.com.
Make sure you wear your nose bell.
Or the Ep10 will come for you.
That was a good movie.
That was a really good movie.
I enjoyed that more than Solaris.
Did you?
I feel like
Did you finally watch that?
That's heretical. Yeah.
I don't think we have talked about it since you watched it.
I really wanted to like it more. I feel like I should have liked it more. There was a lot that was good about it.
Yeah.
But it didn't grab me, and it wasn't entertaining.
It didn't do a lot for me.
Yeah.
I would definitely watch it again.
2001: A Space Odyssey did more for me. Yeah, I would watch it again. I definitely want to explore other Tarkovsky, though, before I
do that.
come back to it. Because I feel like it's kind of a weird, more conceptual, like, piece. And I think him just doing, like, character drama. I don't know that he does character drama, but just straight, like, characters doing things.
Yeah.
Might be more interesting to me.